I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Councillor Kleberg is not able to join us tonight. Neither is Councillor Towsley, and Clerk Ravencroft will be taking minutes remotely. So we do have somebody taking minutes, just not here with us. So next agenda item is citizen comments. I don't see any, so I'm not going to read all that stuff, recite it. So we'll just move on to agenda item 4, budget items. First up, item A is parks, including capital and recreation facilities. We have Director Barker with us tonight to present. And Director, you know the routine. Please introduce yourself, speak up loudly and clearly so those who may be watching from home, especially our city clerk, can really know what to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tim Barker, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Lewiston. Happy to be here on your final day of budget presentations. We will really kind of key in on four main areas within our department, starting off with golf. Tom Bugbee is on the line. He is with Corsco. He is joining us remotely. So at the end of the first couple slides, I'll open it up if there's some questions for Tom related to operations that come from you. So then he can help kind of answer some of those questions that you might have related to whether it's this fiscal year, how things have been going, or future plans and direction. Also tied to the first couple slides, you do have the annual plan that was created by Corsco. This is something that we will receive annually. The first year, is a little bit of a guessing game, and Tom can kind of expand on that a little bit if you do have any questions related to that. So we will go ahead and get started. The other pieces, obviously, we'll talk about parks. Corky will speak to some highlights within the Parks Division this last year, and then Ray Pedrino will speak to recreation, and then Valerie Warren will speak to facilities. And then I'll just cover the 2024 requests that we have. There you go. Okay, so I apologize for a lot of words, but I will work through them with you. I tend to, especially during the budget season, like to put some more narrative in there so then you have something to take home with you and work off of, less writing that you have to do to take notes. So that's a little bit of the reason for additional letters on there. So obviously golf has changed faces this last year with Jeff Briney providing a 30-day notice to end his agreement with the city. We have gone from a leased course to a management course. And so ultimately, for those that are listening in, what that's meant is in the past, we have leased the property to an operator, and then the operators basically managed everything on site on their own and owned all of their own equipment, and then managed also the routine work that's required of them while they're at the course. And then the city's responsibility was more just on replacement. So let's say there's annual HVAC system checks or cleanings that were required to be done. That would have been a responsibility of the leasee. And then if there was a replacement of a system, then the city would step in and do that. Same thing for like roof replacements or other things for structures. So with that change came a lot of, new look for us, trying to pull that together as quickly as we could. We brought Corsco initially on an interim 6-month agreement, which brought them through, I believe, March, while we put an RFP out. There was a selection committee that ended up recommending course go moving forward. And so realistically, they've really only been on board since April 1. So this first year is really their first initial path going through an entire season. As we know with the weather we have now, the winter is much different than summer. And so they're starting to see that with the operations on the course. Luckily, they were able to retain a lot of the current staff that was with the previous operator. So that's really helped us transition a lot more smoothly. Just to add, as you're aware, with that change, city became owner of all of the equipment that was on site. So there was a process we went through to purchase all of that from Golf Fund Inc. This last year. Some of it was newer, some of it was used to get us by, but all had separate values based on what the life cycle was for that piece of equipment. As far as projects, this has kind of allowed us, when you have a leasee that's in there for 20 plus years, if you are a homeowner and lease out or rent out space in your home and you have someone that's there for 20 plus years, you're going to have to go in and make some adjustments and create some projects to upgrade various pieces within the facility. And so that's really what these next items are. We did add new carpet to the clubhouse, new flooring within the kitchen. We've put an FRP on the walls in the kitchen to make things easier to clean. We've bought some new equipment for the kitchen that was needed. We've upgraded electrical within the building and then also within the cart storage areas. So these are items too that when we had done a walkthrough with the fire department, there are certain areas that to get them up to current code, we needed to invest some money. And so that's what we've done with those items. We're in the process right now. There haven't been official wash bays up at the site. Equipment had been getting cleaned on gravel area or next to the building where we found a drain that was draining really to nowhere. And so what we've done is similar to what we have up at the shop up on Warner is we're going to be installing very soon. I think they'll be mobilizing today or tomorrow. Sand oil separators. And so what that'll do is we'll have a certain area for carts that can get washed down. This is especially necessary for gas motor powered equipment. And then also a wash down area up by the maintenance facility for those. So that is a much needed improvement. Along with that, we've been running off of temporary fuel tanks for both gas and diesel. We took a surplus pickup from Public Works, and it essentially sits out at the site, and we have fuel tanks on that right now. But what we'll be doing is installing double-walled larger fuel tanks in the winter. The truck can help get us by. I think they're about 100-gallon capacity, but during the summer, that means that we're refilling those tanks, or the operator's having to refill those tanks about every week or so if they can get that far. So the new fuel tanks that we'll be bringing in will carry more like the 300 to 500 gallons of fuel for them, so then they can be more efficient on site. One other piece that we want to get completed this year is, if you haven't been out to the golf course, it's a very rough driveway down into the course, and so we want to get that asphalted, and so then that's much smoother. It's just deteriorated over time, and that's really a project that the city needed to be doing anyway as infrastructure for the site. So that's something that will help just with the beautification and entryway into the golf course. Just a couple things to note with the agreement with Coursego. There's various projects that you'll see within their or programs within their plan that they have. One of them is community events. We want to draw those that aren't golfers to the site still, so create some recreational opportunities up there. This last winter, they did a cookie decorating class that was very well attended, but we want to see more interaction like that. There's a program that Coursego runs with elementary school youth as well, typically in the spring. where they'll bring them out and teach them about turf management and the science behind that. So we're looking forward to seeing some of those programs come through. I do want to note the last piece on the bottom there that just as a note, there were a couple areas within our operations that we're going to see some reductions in revenues. One of those is from our food and beverage side. The kitchen had to be shut down for a 2-month period for the renovations that we did. We tried to do that in a time period, late winter, early spring, before we really ramped up and became a lot busier. But there still was some lost revenue from that time frame. And then obviously with the golf course does fall within the city's water system, and so we are on restriction use up there. And so we have had a few tournaments that we typically do host at the site that had changed location this year. And so tournaments, depending on the tournament, that could be a difference between about $5,000 to $15,000 in lost revenue for single day tournaments. So despite that, Tom would, I'm sure, agree that we're still doing very well. What we're looking at is for this year, their initial projections, we're hoping to end the year, or the fiscal year, a little bit above what the original projections were, so that's good news. So on the right-hand side, you can see a comparison between what our projected rounds are for this year, what's being proposed as potential rounds for next year. Same with the revenues. You can see a fair amount of increase within the revenues, which is always great to see as we try to strive for the golf course to be self-sufficient. Is really one of the main reasons why we were looking at bringing a professional organization in to manage the course. Expenses obviously are up there, and then the net income that you're looking at there as well. So the positive is that we're not seeing a negative number right there. There are some additional costs that aren't running through the operations side of the golf course, items like the water payment. So that's something that we're working through. Sorry, my kid's calling me. So there are some things that as we move forward, we also are looking at some incentives for Course Code to try to ramp up some of those revenues to try and help us better offset those expenses. But I would confidently say that in year one, we're definitely looking a lot stronger than what we may have otherwise without having a partnership with someone like Coursego. So just a couple last highlights there for FY24. The increased revenues are directly tied to that estimate of 7.3% increase for the paid rounds. I'm putting percentages in there for increases, but you'll see the detail of those when we do our fee proposals. And so you'll have those that hearing on, I believe it's August 14th, whenever the first budget hearing is. So all of that information will be compiled with our other fee proposals for the department and then available. But we're looking at increasing various prices. Some of them are minor, like you can see for the golf range bucket, very small increase there. To merchandise, obviously these are all things that we need to keep up with inflation elsewhere. The biggest increase that you're going to see is within food and beverage. Prices have been very stagnant within the golf course concessionaire operations, and so we're really going to need to address that and make it more consistent with what the market is charging. So that's why that 15.2% is listed there. As far as capital needs, just wanted to cover a few things. I did already talk about those that we're looking to address within fiscal year 23. They are not listed as far as costs on there on the right-hand side. That's why, is because we're not looking at needing funding for 24 for those. But there are projects like the driving range pole and nets. There are essentially no netting or posts that are up there except for the end of the range. And so it's wide open from the number one fairway to the west side where we now have a roadway really directly up against the property line for a new subdivision that's going in there. So we want to make sure that we're not creating conflict on that side, on the west side, with any vehicle traffic that's coming in. And to enhance the look of and feel and use of the driving range as well. It's definitely underutilized at this point, and we have a huge opportunity for the amount of practice space that we have between the putting green area, our chipping area, and then a nice big driving range. Leveling of tee boxes and new sod, this is a project that would be done over a series of years. And that's why it's noted about $15,000 a year over 4 years. Same thing with the bunker refurbishment, looking at approximately $25,000 a year over 4 years for that project. Maintenance equipment, I kind of noted earlier that we bought as-is equipment. A couple of the pieces of equipment, the two on the bottom are ones that we would, that Corsco's recommending for replacement. And as we know from other equipment that we've been purchasing lately, we may be looking at 12 to 18 months delivery time for some of these. So the greens mower and surrounds mower are two pieces that we have now, but are going to be in need of replacement very soon. And then they're recommending to add two pieces of equipment, a tractor and top dresser, which we do not have at the site at this time. So with that, the last thing I just have a picture of there, that is the cover of the annual plan. It's very well detailed. A lot of the information that I briefly spoke to, if you're wondering, okay, we're saying that we're expecting over 7% increase in rounds. Why is that? So there is details within that plan that they've provided to us that explain their reasoning behind what those increases would be caused from. And then it does get into the general ledger budget of what their operations, their expectations are for this next year by line items. So you're aware also, before we open up for any questions, if there are any, we do receive monthly reports from Corsco. So that's very nice that we're getting those. Both Amy and I receive those Excel spreadsheets that are extremely detailed and really dig down deep into each separate area, whether it's their direct costs related to personnel, to equipment, to the pro shop, everything that's related to their operations there, we do receive that monthly. And those are due to us by the 20th of the next month, so a pretty quick about 3 week turnaround, sometimes a little bit sooner. But again, that's something that we weren't receiving previously. And so it's been very helpful for us to kind of track and watch the progression that's happened as we've moved into the busier season. So
Tim, over here on the projects completed, were those covered by the revenues generated?
So those are coming from, and Amy can probably give me a better answer as far as what's that? So those are coming from general fund reserves, and those will be showing up because they were unanticipated. And as we didn't, the last August, the budget was approved. And so when this process change happened, we didn't budget for any of this. And so you'll see in your budget amendments, those listed as items, and they're coming from the general fund reserve.
So those aren't included in your 23 expenses?
Not on what, they are not. Because those are expenses taken on by the city as opposed to the expenses that.
But it was still cost to do the golf course, right?
Yep. Yeah, so what the 23 expenses were that were noted, if you're talking about these here, that expense, the $747,000, those are directly related to the operations on their side, not on the city side. Tom, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I'll just say thank you for having me here tonight. And it's been a kind of a wild 9 months, right? 6 months under the temporary contract, and now 3 months under the longer term contract. But we've very much enjoyed the time so far. Working with city staff has been absolutely fantastic. And, we are exceeding our early projections, and we're very optimistic as we look into the future years. And you've got a great group of very loyal golfers out there that have embraced us since the first day, and we're enjoying our time.
Mr. Mayor, I have some questions.
Good, Counselor.
So Tim, 171-ish thousand in capital ask.
As far as maintenance equipment,
And that's in this upcoming fiscal year, not spread over the 2-year budget, correct?
correct.
And then when we made the payment of 241,000, that is general fund dollars.
Correct.
So where are we? I mean, I hear that we're doing well. Where are we with projections of maybe getting some revenue into the fund so that we're not using general fund dollars for continued improvements that I think we will continue to find?
Good question. So that's obviously an option for us to pull from as part of the monthly requirements within their expenses. We do require them to put money aside for capital improvements. So we've been, I don't know if Tom probably doesn't have that in front of him, but I believe as of right now in year one, I think we were putting about $5,000 aside for those improvements per month. So that is
So-
potentially something we could draw from to help pay for some of these, whether it's the projects, most likely. We are planning to, and I've met with Fleet to make sure that we get these equipment identified within our fleet system, so then we can have those on replacement plans. Maintenance occurs on site.
And then, as far as the land improvements, who's making those assessments and recommendation? Is that Corsco or is that city staff?
So it's been a combination. We've done some of that work. As far as the detailed pieces, like the leveling of tee boxes, new sod, and then the bunker refurbishment, we're using their expertise for those. As far as items that are getting done this year, that's all been city-driven. We've received those items as recommendations, and obviously some of those are very needed, but we've driven those from the city side.
And then one last follow-up, as far as the netting, obviously to mitigate disruption into the new subdivision, have we talked with the developer on any kind of partnership, anything to help us cut costs? Because I feel like, I'm committed to keeping our city assets, but we've been dipping in, and it's going to be an investment, but have we had those conversations to get creative to help cut some of the costs that we've had electrical, I think you said updates, but I question whether they were updates or just fixes to some issues that were there. Plus we paid for equipment that was old due to the fact that we would have to wait for our own. I'd like to know that we're trying to, we're leaving nothing unturned in the sense that we're not coming after that general fund for everything we need up there.
No, and I totally appreciate and get that. If I can just make sure I know what you're asking is related to the driving range. Have we had conversations with the developer to the west as far as maybe a shared cost or partnership on that? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay. So the way I've approached it so far to date is similar to the netting we had to put up on the number 4 tee box and the relocation of and redesign of holes 3 and 4 when Life Flight went in. We were told from the airport authority and those in charge that because it is an issue that's potentially being caused from our leased property that we were fully responsible for that. I initially approached Life Flight to try to partner on that, and that went nowhere. And so the city ended up taking the entire burden of those two projects. So my assumption moving forward, I have no problem reaching out to the developer, but my assumption moving forward is that we may get the same result. But we're also talking about, that was a leasee and a leasee, where this is a leasee and a developer. But that's definitely a potential for possibly some assistance.
You know, when you're doing a development and you want it to look a certain way, they might help with that. And again, I get the fact that people feel like it's all on us, but we were also there first, and golfers are golfers, and I hit it straight about as many times as Tiger Woods hits it crooked. So they've kind of played their own hand. So I do think that we need to, hold a strong line of, we appreciate that the build's happening, but these are things that we do need to partner on, and the city honestly isn't in the position to take on the entire cost, when if you choose to live by a golf course, you might get hit with a golf ball. So just a suggestion to try to figure out some ways to cover those costs. But I appreciate that we're making those improvements, because I do think a beautiful golf course, a popular golf course, is a huge asset to our city. And to be up by the airport where you can golf and have a plane take off behind you is something that we need to invest in. But I think we need to make sure we're leaving no rock unturned as far as helping those funding.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
All right, thanks for joining us, Tom. You're more than welcome to stick around. I'm sure you'd enjoy the rest of the show, but understand if you need to get home.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, everyone.
All right, we'll go ahead and bring Corky Fazio up and have him introduce himself and talk about some accomplishments within parks this last year.
Hello, I'm Corky Fazio, Grounds Maintenance Supervisor, Parks and Recreation.
Sorry, that was my job.
That's okay. Yeah. We didn't even have one of these when I started with the city 31 years ago, so, we've learned. Through the course of the year, we've been able to, we just find things in our budget most of the time. We try and find to stay up with a lot of the maintenance needs. So one of the things that we did to reduce a lot of maintenance is down at Pepsi Park in Little Clearwater. They also call it Inland Cellular Field. Little League had been fighting weather all the time. So in their baseball fields, they were constantly putting drying agent down. It was costing them a lot of money. We were able to get some artificial turf. It was used artificial turf, and we put it in, and just basically made the situation for them that they could play at any time. So we they bought the sod, we installed it, put a new irrigation system in, so everything there is just up to snuff. So this year it really played well. With the same idea up at Airport Park, I think it was about 22 years ago, we had purchased elephant netting, elephant fence. It was chain link fence that was for behind home plate at airports 1, 2, 3, and 4. Through the years, with all the baseballs, softballs that hit it, it started just warping out. To do that today, we couldn't even come close to it. So we tried a netting, where the netting was $800 versus up to $3,000 per field. So we did that on all those backstops. We're looking forward to doing it in a couple more. The mayor was involved with a meeting that we had. We also had out at Nimipu Energy with the Nez Perce tribe. We talked about a lot of solar stuff, possibly putting solar in up at Community Park. We're actually working on a thing to put it on the building that's there. That's as much as I know about solar for right now. It's kind of a unique program. There's no upfront cost to the city. That's the beauty of it. And I knew that would get a little raise. So it's still in the process. We'll leave it at that for right now. Just like we do it every year, 80 new rose bushes were planted. Sometimes what we do is we expand. We've had some die. We've had some people cut them back. So that's just kind of a common thing that we do every year. We stay with Jackson Perkins, and typically a rose of the year. One of the things to really help us in the wintertime or the fall is we purchased a sweeper from the street department, basically through Fleet. They were getting rid of it, and it was a really functional piece of equipment for us. It was, it's about, I'd be guessing probably in the $150,000 range, and we purchased it for $20,000 is all they were gonna get for what do you call that? Trade-in, thank you. So the trade value was there. We go around and do parking lots with it. We put the parking lots, pathways, and all that. It's just been an excellent piece of equipment for us. It's actually speeded things up. There's a lot of our equipment we act like Swiss Army knife with them. We turn them into everything. We've also hired a city arborist. Ted Wicks used to own TW Tree Service, and he's currently going through and pruning in certain parks. We've already completed Community Park, Airport Park, downtown here. We're in through Brackenberry Square, down in the D Street parking lot. We're currently up at Harrith. We cannot put a number on what he's doing for us. And the assistant that's with him is an inmate. So he's running it with an inmate, and it's really a good deal for the city. We also purchased a plow for our new tractor. We bought a tractor a couple years ago, and we've put a plow on that so we can now get around. Our job has expanded to more and more parking lots. Our snow removal expectations have grown. We do all of the parks and everything along with all the city buildings. So along with PD and police training center. So it's kind of one of those where we got away from the shovel and started getting into a plow. Also helped with Annabelle Osborne's house, get to remove that house. That was kind of interesting to watch. They're also in the process of restoring the wetlands up there. Which is currently on hold. They're trying to let the pond dry out. We also have assisted with the Rotary Club. They've purchased a lot of amenities. We put in a pathway for them. We never did that, so we figured it'd be kind of fun to do with them. They fronted everything. Everything was their cost. The city's involvement was basically labor and equipment. So they've put in a little sunshade. It's really nice. We facilitated the concrete installation there. We're currently putting in, and I've been saying that there's it's kind of a cursed drinking fountain. Every time we go to that drinking fountain, something else somewhere blows up. So we're hoping to complete that for them. They've also completed 2 other pathways down in, which were desperately needed. The big one right now is we're involved with the pickleball courts. The pickleball courts at Sunset Park. We've removed all the fencing, all the asphalt. The grading has been done, or I should say most of the rough grading. Gravel added. We're going to start with the net post installations will be next. Probably next week. The sidewalk will be put in. And shortly thereafter, Herco will come in and do the asphalt. So it's moving along, and we're trying to move it as fast as we can. And we're going to get into the kind of the slowest portion of it here very soon. The main lines that I put in there, the reason I put those in there is with all the utilities, and they're using all kinds of subcontractors, they ran into 2 of our lines. They were supposed to be down 5 feet, and they were down 2 feet. And they center punched 2 main lines in the locomotive area. we had huge things dug up, just trying to find them. They also hit a lot of our electrical, so we've been able to, that's what I'm saying, that we think that the drinking fountain is a little bit cursed. So we've got that fixed and we're okay now. You've probably all seen it, in the paper, and I know the mayor was right next to it. And the tiny mobile robot named Giles was a donation from Potlatch Credit Union, and we've been able to use it quite a bit. We actually used it today to map out a field for the children's home. So we've been able to work with the school district, the children's home, LCSC, Lewiston High School, you name it. Sacagawea Junior High. What it has is we don't have to pull strings anymore. It's a 6-minute job instead of maybe an hour or 2-hour job. So it's really went well. As Tim mentioned earlier, we installed some safety netting and posts up at number 3 tee box.
It's number 4.
Okay, number 4. I don't play golf, so. And so we thought that would be fun. We've never done anything like that, so it might be something down the road. We have to put up a backstop. So those are most of the highlights. You can't really glorify mowing too much. Mowing, watering, and just trying to prune things. Do you want me to do or are you doing this?
I can go
The
through
proposal?
Yeah,
You're doing it?
yeah.
Oh, good.
You can stand.
I stand for questions, if anybody has any. All right, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You might still get a question.
Okay.
So our capital requests, the park side of our operations receives $100,000 a year out of the property taxes. And so we're already receiving the funds in right now. And so that's what the note is related to, the funding through Parks Capital Account. But I wanted to spell out some of the projects that we're planning to do. As Corky spoke to, we'd still continue to do additional projects, but these are some of the bigger ones that we're pre-planning for this next year. So Corky's been asking me to give him some funding for the Jewett Park irrigation system. It's been needing replacement for some time, so we are identifying that as one that we want to get completed this year. Ball field continued fencing replacement, as he mentioned, that we've been doing up at Airport Park. We're very happy with the netting system that we have in place. It's a lot easier to see through, and when teams are practicing, warming up, and doing soft toss, we're no longer going to get the fences bending because of balls getting hit against the fencing. So it's going to be a much better experience. New fence related to the Harith first base, from first base to right field. That's along, what road is that? 16th and Grell. Back in my playing days, at one time, I remember a car driving through that intersection, not making the turn. Luckily, we were in between half innings, so nobody was in the outfield. But the other issue we have on some of our fields, unfortunately, tends to be in the winter or springtime, is vehicles getting out onto the fields and doing cookies and tearing up our turf. So this is more of a protective barrier that we want to have in place to deter that from happening up at Harith. Harith tends to get that occurring to them at least once a year, and we feel that that money is well worth the expense that's going to go into it. There's a center, so the next piece, the Kiwanis Park Skate Park turf. What that is there was a landscaped area that was planned in the center of the skate park. It's now dirt because the original grasses, it's become a viewing area in the middle, kind of a safety zone. And so from day one, that turf could not really take just because of all of the pressure it was taking from those spectators. And so we want to be able to put synthetic turf in there. Right now, what's happening is there's rock, dirt in there. When it rains, it becomes mud. Everything flows into the skate park. And if you know skate parks at all, it needs an extremely smooth surface. Even a couple weeks ago, I got a message from one of our frequent users that he ended up breaking his wrist because he caught on a rock that had fallen onto the surface that he couldn't see when he was skating. So we really feel like that's a safety piece that we need to have in place at that park. Ball field, general improvements at Airport Park, just kind of generalize that. That again, if you're familiar with any of our ball fields, we like to bring in used synthetic turf. A lot of it's to reduce our maintenance costs. We use it quite a bit at home plates, pitching mounds, the areas off the field. So the wings, so the base, essentially out of bounds areas. And so that's to help us continue some of those projects at some of our fields. Again, reducing maintenance. We don't buy top of the line or the most expensive turf. We look for deals because those areas, it just fits really well to be able to use synthetic for that. And we've had a lot of success with it. Playground equipment and bark replacement, just for replacing bark at one site, costs about $10,000 to replace, to add new bark in. And so again, a lot of our playground equipment is now getting to the age of about 20, 25 years. We may have a single slide that we can no longer replace a like for like, but purchasing a new slide may cost us anywhere between $6,000 to $10,000 just to replace a slide. So that's just continual maintenance that we're going to have to do. We are facing a lot of tubes that are cracking, and so for safety reasons, we want to make sure that we stay on top of those replacement pieces. One other capital project that the Parks and Rec Commission has supported and wants to see moving forward they have for a few years. But I think we're at the point we really just need to get it done because with us going online for park reservations for our shelters, we've probably seen almost half of our shelters, and we haven't even really started advertising our online system because we're working through a few kinks here and there. But it's going to be so much more utilized, that online system for reservations, and I think just make it easier for people to book up our shelters. So through the park reservation account, that's an account that was set up for any reservations that come in through our park system. It goes into a separate account for the Parks and Rec Commission to be able to utilize to make improvements within our park system. So then we're not having to come to council annually and ask for new dollars. So that's been a great project for account that's been there for a number of years to be able to have that citizen group that represents our community make those decisions. So new shelter on the south end of the park near the playground is where they would like to locate that. Far enough away, obviously, from the band shell that we could have multiple small rentals going on at one time. And I think that would rent out quite often. So again, that's money that would be coming out of that park reservation account. And just to end the park side, and I've noted this in the other budgets too, we have adjusted some funds here and there for things like utilities and other pieces as we are not requesting new funds, but trying to reallocate funds within both the parks and the urban forestry side that Corky oversees. We've already talked about cemetery, but trying to reallocate those. Again, fuel is one of those other areas, chemicals operating, where we are continually battling with increasing prices. But we think with some of those changes, we should be able to meet our needs for this next year. Any questions within parks?
How often do we have to change the bark out?
How often in a playground, for each playground, you change?
It's actually adding two. It's a 5-bar, it's a specially engineered ADA it meets ADA requirements. It can happen every 5 years, 3 to 5 years. Case in point, we put in Kiwanis and the airport last year at this time.
You said that was 10,000?
Yeah, approximately about 10,000.
So I know parks will sometimes have that, it's just like a squishy material that just lays over. How much is that and how long does that last?
So there's a few different options for playground surfacing. You can do kind of almost like carpet tiles where you can replace them. You can do a pour in place you can do synthetic turf. Moving forward, that would probably be my recommendation, would go with like a synthetic turf product. Because the issue you have with a pour in place is someone gouges. Now you've got to try to pour it. It's almost like concrete where you try to pour it and match it. It's not as strong as it was when it was originally put in. The tiles are a good option, but both of those are a lot more expensive than the synthetic turf. The cheapest option is the engineered wood fiber, and for now, and so that's what we've continued to do. But we have looked, and some of the other pricing's coming down a little bit, but it's still, the least expensive option is the wood fiber.
Is it least expensive though in the short time, but then in the long run, like, cause it seems like we might have more of a return on investment if we would say something that we don't have to change for 5 to 10 years versus every 3 to 5 years.
So for example, Kiwanis Park, say we spent 10,000 every 5 years, so over a 10-year period, which is typical 10 to 15 years for replacement of something, you're looking at 20,000 for the engineered wood fiber, where the pour in place or the squares or synthetic turf is going to be probably 20 to 30,000 easy. It's still a little bit less expensive. I mean, I'd much rather see a different product because things happen like last week or a week before when we had the rainstorm. What we're getting is all the material coming off of the roadway, and so it's intermixing with the engineered wood fiber, and so it's a lot more messy to try to clean that up than for if we were to have something that we could just wipe off and easily clean, like a pour in place or synthetic.
And then did you say how long those last versus?
Typically synthetic turf, I mean, like a sport field, you're looking at 10 years usually tops. Something like this where, you know, it's not getting the beating like a athletic facility would, you might get 15 years probably out of it.
At like 20,000, you said to probably.
More like probably 30
30.
to 40 is typical.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. A lot of our playground areas are quite large, and so it's obviously a lot more expensive to cover those.
Right.
All right. We'll move on. Yep.
I have a couple questions. Corky mentioned Jewett Park, and I was just wondering, what's the main use of that park? And then also, can you explain again the partnerships or the services we've been providing to Boys and Girls Club and the schools? I wasn't quite catching what we were working on with those groups.
So Jewett Park is one of our leased properties. We lease that from the children's home, and so it's managed as a neighborhood park. So that's the primary use that we have for it, although obviously it's the playground for the children's home residential area, so they do use that on occasion. And then as far as the partnerships, all of those agencies are ones that we have joint use agreements with. And as we're using the tiny mobile robot at those facilities, they are covering the cost of the paint. For those, we're not fronting the cost for that. But that's something that we may continue to do as partnership, but obviously our programs come first as priority.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
All right, we'll move on to recreation, and we'll have Ray Padrina to chat about some highlights. Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Today I'm here to present to you the highlights for the Recreation Division for the fiscal year '23. Something that I'm really proud of our division is I felt like we really embodied our department's mission to create community through our programs, our parks, and our facilities. First off, with us being able to launch our Civic Rec platform, an online platform that allows our community members the ability to register for their favorite programs or an upcoming program or an event, or reserve one of our facilities or one of our parks from the comforts of their own couch. Something that in the past, they've had to come down to the community center and we would have to go through that paperwork for them to reserve or register for a program. Through the utilizations of our facilities, rather it be our Fenton Gym, the community center, or our ball fields. Seeing how much use it does get, Fenton Gym during those winter cold months, October through March, over a 90% utilization of the days during that time frame, rather it be our programming, or rather it be with an outside organization reserving it for a practice or a birthday party, whatever it may be. Same thing with our ball fields, getting utilized during that spring, summertime. So from March all the way up till now, again, over 9% utilization on a day-to-day basis with either one of our programs using a ball field or an outside organization using a ball field, where most times we're using multiple fields, 5+ fields within a given day. And our programs in general, seeing those increased numbers, rather it be a youth program, adult program, even our senior programs, seeing numbers increase in all three of those areas. More teams signing up for our adult programs, maxing out on our special events that we could offer for our community members, rather be our Daddy-Daughter Dance or Dinner with the Grinch. Seniors being involved in our senior trips that we take out to surrounding area eateries, or maybe a trip to go see a show up in Spokane, being able to fill our van and max out with that. So those are where those highlights come from the recreation division this fiscal year, and we're continuing to strive to embody our mission more and more each fiscal year.
All right, as far as recreation goes, capital request this year, obviously looking at pools. Pool liner is something that we've requested the last few years at Burt Lips Pool. That's something that is still needed. The second line item is kind of that unknown at this point. We've done a number of different tests up at Burt Lips Pool to figure out where where we're having water escape from. And so until we can figure out ultimately where that's happening, most likely it could be multiple locations. We're talking about a facility built in 1946. About every 10 years, we do some major renovations to that to try to reduce what's escaping from the pool, but it's still a very old shell, and so that facility does need some work. But we hope to be able to have some definite ideas hopefully soon as related to where we think the costs and need are to help get that pool back up and running. Again, a second pool liner at Orchards Pool. We think the best use of those funds, kind of similar to talking about park playground surfacing. We put a significant amount of staff time into the pools prior to them opening and then closing them. If we were to have pool liners, we would definitely make back what we invest in those pool liners and free up our staff, our maintenance staff from facilities to be able to work on other projects in those fall and spring seasons. Really within those two pools, you're talking about Steve Lee, who's been one of our longtime facility maintenance technicians, freeing up about 2 months of his personal time and schedule to be able to put the effort into those pools to get them up and running or to shut them down in the fall. Fenton Gym floor replacement. This is within the recreation, and then you'll see on the facility side plan for roof replacement, hopefully soon. This floor is desperately in need of replacement and has been for some time. I think I first probably brought it to council about 10 years ago, and our cost has probably doubled almost since that time. So the floor is still there. I think it would be utilized even more for groups if we had a surface in there that was much easier on the body when playing. And I'll kind of end it there. Like I mentioned, same thing goes as far as the general budget, move some funds around to be able to meet some of the needs that we have in some of our increased annual costs of doing business within those set budgets of recreation, which is the 126, senior nutrition, and then the aquatic side of things. Yes.
Did you say that the burnt lips, the repairs were requested last year but denied?
The pool liner was.
And would the pool liner solve the leaking problem?
We don't know yet. If the source of the leak is solely contained to the pool shell, then it would. But if we're looking at the pool shell, if we're looking at and finding that within the circulation system, pipes, other things are causing leaks as well, wouldn't resolve that. We know that we are losing water from the pool directly. When we shut off the meter, for about, I think it was about 18 hours and went back and checked, we lost about 6 to 8 inches of water, which equates to, I think it was about 23,000 gallons. So we know when the system isn't pushing things through, we're losing water. So it would help, but I want to make sure that we resolve that issue completely instead of Band-Aiding one and then not realizing we have another issue.
So is the evaluation internal or is it an external source that would?
Internal within the city at this point, depending on the ability of some of, and we've been partnering quite a bit with Public Works. I don't know how much Dustin knows of that. I try to keep him out of it. But we've had like ground penetrating radar is a piece of equipment from Public Works. We've had sewer crews out there to help take a look at manholes, covers, and help us try to see if we can track anything, which we haven't found anything yet. They have within, I think it's the street side, we may be able to utilize, it depends on how our pipe system works. They have a camera system. If not, that might be something we have to bring a consultant in or somebody that specializes in that to help us run a line through the pipes to see what the condition is of the pipes. So we're trying to do as much as we can internally to try to rule some things out before we go to the external side.
2 questions. One is how much is the current rates for the public pools? I can't remember.
$2.
And when was the last time we've raised that?
Gosh, it's probably been 10 years and I about got thrown out of the council meeting trying to raise it from $1.50 to $2.
When was that?
Like I said, about 10 years ago.
When you did it 10
Yep.
years ago?
Yeah, and my obviously some increased revenue was my anticipation, but at the same time, some efficiencies, not having to deal with change, going from $1.50 to $2 was the idea at that plan. Aquatics has always kind of been a bit of an interesting program. You know, there's only one pool I know of in the Northwest that makes money, but we all know that they're very much needed in the community, especially when we live on 2 rivers. But we can look at that as an option moving forward. We have done some slight increases over the last few years to our membership rates. So our season passes, we have increased. But the pool rate, just drop-in hasn't raised in about 10. Yep. All right.
Ray, I'm going to follow up with you. I have some questions, but I will come talk to you about those on the programs. Thank you.
All right.
Tim?
Yep.
What's the, do you happen to know what it costs to go swimming indoors at the aquatic center in Clarkston?
Like $12.
$12?
It's around that.
Cassie says
Per-
around $12.
For the indoor per visit?
Like 8, well, yeah, 8 to 9. It's it's definitely not $2.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
above
8 to 9 it sounds
$5.
like, yeah, I haven't looked recently, but yeah, I believe it's probably 8 to 9, and then it's probably a couple bucks more for the outdoor. So it's definitely different, a far cry. We had one summer that we were looking at having to partner up and trying to come up with some sort of mutual agreement about 15 years ago, but we didn't end up needing to do that because we were able to get our pools up and running. But it's definitely vastly different than what we charge.
$7.99 for adults 18 through 59 and $5.99 for youth for indoor.
For indoor.
For outdoor is $11.99 and $10.99.
I think that's good information to have when we talk about, especially if we need to rehab I believe a well-loved pool by our community. I don't see people wanting to let go of Burt Lips. So, when you have those comparisons, it's help you maybe get something passed.
Yep, no, thank you. Yeah, and as you know, both pools serve really two separate populations. Orchard's pool tends to be a commuter pool, and Burt Lips is neighborhood kids that are walking to it, so. Right, if nothing else there, I'll bring Valerie up to talk about some highlights within facilities.
Hi, everyone. I'm Valerie Warren, Parks and Recs Facility Supervisor. And let's see, thank you. Sorry. I assisted with the code updates, the golf course. And then I was able to replace a motherboard on the chiller at City Hall, which extended the life of the chiller a few years, so that was a big win. We had some aging lights at Sunset Ball Field. We were able to get about half of the ones that were out back working again, and then the other half of them only cost us the cost of the labor because the rebates were so good on the lighting. I got the custodians. I have a new custodian lead this year, and he's doing really well, and he's got the teams doing regular scheduled maintenance in the building. So instead of just regular cleaning, they're scrubbing and shampooing, and they all have their regular schedules. They work on team projects together to restore floors and other projects like that. I've applied for several grants to support projects. We've got paint for a building for the Carnegie. There's a grant out for that. There's grants to help with their pools. Some grants for solar and different items. So those are exciting. Implemented a year-long safety training with the certifications for the custodians. It does twofold. It makes them more confident in how to do their job and safer in understanding how to work with the equipment and the chemicals. It also boosts their confidence and how to do their job with less oversight. And it helps their morale because they get a printout certificate that says they've had certificate training. We completed the new roof at the community center and also installed a new roof hatch there so we could access the roof from inside instead of having to put a ladder up outside. Completed floor restoration also at the community center. The lobby carpet was quite old, and considering it's a stop for the buses, gets a lot of heavy traffic, so we removed the carpet, honed the concrete, and polished it up, so it's really easy to maintain, can't be damaged. It's much nicer. And then also the community center bathroom floors were quite aged, but rather than tear out the tile and put a new floor in, there's a new system out that's an epoxy type coating that we poured over the floor, so we didn't have to remove anything in there. They just put the new coating on, and it's about a 30 to 50-year life depending on the use. So it's a good investment. We awarded the new vendor at the library for custodial, and they're doing really well. We installed a new ADA ramp and an updated ADA gate at Orchards Pool. Before the ADA ramp access was at the back end of the pool, so they actually didn't go through the building. They used to go in through the back end of the pool and have to go up to the front that way. So now they can go into the pool from the front door like everybody else. And they can also, there was no access for the kiddie pool for ADA access, and now that's been created as well. And for the third year in a row, we've had no injuries. That's wonderful. Questions?
And you might not be able to answer this, but Fire Station 2 restroom and dorm remodel due to mold. How toxic is it for that mold to be sitting there, people being there?
It is not that type of mold
Okay,
right now.
that would be like a black mold.
It's in the beginning stages. Yeah, they can look similar, but when we had it tested, we have some time.
Okay, thank you. Awesome, thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, I can just try to quickly go through these next few pieces. We obviously have some more conversations to come in July and August related to facilities, both properties and then current facilities that we have. So I'll try to keep this a little bit brief. Based on Valerie's presentation to you back this spring, we came up with a list of some most needed items, and so that's what's listed here related to the capital request. So these are our highest priorities for projects that we feel need to be done this next year as we look towards evaluating all of our facilities and how we want to move forward. So last year in the budget, that bottom section, we did receive an additional $250,000 within her budget for projects. So we'd like to have that funding continue. And then one of the other pieces that we added on there that we would like funding for this year would be the Carnegie Library boiler replacement. That boiler is quite old and needs to be upgraded as long as the city continues to own that facility. So again, went through that really quickly, but if you have any questions related to facilities, we'd be happy to answer those at this time. And again, in July, we'll talk more in depth on where we're at with our overall evaluation of all of our facilities and start providing some recommendations of how we should move forward or look at moving forward. And then in August, there'll be discussions related to potential surplus of some properties. All right?
Good, yeah, and then I'm just gonna ask if council can read the strategic planning check.
That's all I was gonna say too,
Yeah, I
actually.
really appreciate
if you
it.
believe that.
Because we got a lot ahead of us
Yeah.
yet.
No, I just wanted to add this on here because strategic planning obviously is very important, but I wanted to show you a checklist of items that have been completed, are in the works, and then what is planned to be addressed within the strategic plan for next year and our priorities, so.
And I think one of the big things for me, at least in the next year, is a facility master plan. And so we'll talk about that when we look at other facilities and deferred maintenance and stuff like that, so. Okay. Did you have a question, Councilman? Oh, okay. Thank you, Tim.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Corky and Ray and Val, thank you. You don't know what you're missing when you don't come to these night meetings.
Thank you.
Corky's got to get up in about 4 hours. Dr. Gordon, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Amy Gordon, City Treasurer. And I will be presenting the rest of the agenda, so I'm just gonna flow through it. We'll start with finance, and then we'll go in and we'll talk about some of the general fund revenue items, and then from there, we'll kind of wrap up the budget for you. So starting with finance, included in the finance department is our general accounting division, our purchasing division, our utility billing division, and then we also have fleet services. I won't be discussing fleet today because they are in a separate fund, an internal service fund, which that was part of your presentation during work session 1. So in the 3 divisions of utility billing, purchasing, and general accounting, we have 13 employees. That includes myself, a financial services manager who oversees both utility billing and purchasing, and then the staff members of utility, purchasing, and accounting. And like a lot of administrative offices, our primary expense in our budget is related to personnel costs. But we do have a few other areas of our budget that could appear large without an explanation, so I kind of wanted to go over those today. I haven't, so we have a supplies budget that runs approximately, in fiscal year 24, it'll be about $77,000. And then we have a services budget of about $320,000. So our supplies is primarily related to postage. So that is the bulk of our supplies budget. And then the rest of it is general office supplies. So our, folders, our check stock, our envelopes, paper. We go through a lot of paper and envelopes and checks. And then in our services budget, we have our IT rates. We're probably one of the heaviest users of IT. All 13 employees in those 3 divisions, we all reside in Munis all day long. So we're using that software all day. And then we have a printing and mailing contract that processes our utility bills for us. And we also pay the audit fees out of our budget. So that's in our services budget. And then there's some software in there, which I will get to here in a minute, because I did make a few requests this year. Overall, my budget went up approximately $80,000, and half of that is from the request I made. So the budget requests that I made this year are to increase our audit fees by $15,000. That would take our audit fee that we paid this year of $50,000 up to $65,000. We just went through the RFP and completed that process. I'll be bringing that to council for approval at the end of July. I knew before going into the RFP to expect about a $15,000 increase just based off other supplies and material costs that we've seen increase by 30%. And that was pretty much on the nose of what we received as a proposal. So our proposal that we'll be presenting to you is an audit fee of $65,000 for the first year, and then that will graduate up to $75,000 over the 5 years of the contract. I can tell you we have received price proposals in previous RFPs 5 years ago and even 10 years ago that exceeded the $65,000 that we would be paying for our 23 audit. And then we do have a request in there for postage. Last year, we had a postage increase about this time last year that we absorbed in our budget. We absorbed it in our 23 budget in addition to doing the cuts that the mayor had asked us. So that made our budget pretty tight overall. And then in January, there was a postage increase, and there's another postage increase scheduled for this summer. So we can't afford the postage with our current budget. And then we also have a request in purchasing of $20,000 for a procurement software. And that would be a software that would, one of the biggest benefits we'd get off of procurement software is also contract management, so that we can manage the terms of a contract, the expiration dates of a contract. We can also have task features in there, so once we open a procurement, it would build out our timelines and assign the tasks to all the appropriate players in that procurement, as well as give us a system in which we can store templates that departments can access. It would integrate online with our platform for where we'd put out our RFPs and our bid proposal information. That's been a strategic goal of ours for several years. We've actually had a budget line item in both 22 and 23 of 10,000. 22, they never did anything to pursue the procurement software. And the current year, we did a little bit of research and found out we were needing about another 20,000 to get a procurement software. The couple that we've spoken to is approximately 30,000. We're doing a request for information right now. We're working with IT to build that so that we can kind of get a better idea of what type of procurement softwares that would be out there that would have that contract management, and see if maybe we can get a product that would be a little catered to what our needs are. So that might help us with the cost if we can just tailor it down to what we need out of the software.
Is that an annual cost, or is that a one-time fee for the software?
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't gotten the information back on it. But yes, I think we would have a one-time fee in it that would include some implementation. And then we would have an ongoing annual fee. Almost all softwares these days you're paying an annual license fee to use it. So, and it would be cloud-based as well.
Is there ways that we can cut back on the cost of paper? Things that we could do to kind of print less paper, use less paper, I don't know.
Well, I mean, paper is used citywide, so I can't speak for other departments. We have to send out invoices, so those have to go on paper. With our utility billing division and the software we have for utility billing, we do have a lot of our citizens signed up for electronic invoices. We're always promoting that. We put information about it in our new owner packets. So we are always encouraging citizens to go to electronic billings as well as automatic utility billing payments. But like in our office, we're always probably going to print out quite a bit of reports because we have so much proofing to do. And when you're going line by line by line, to do it on a computer screen is very hard on your eyes. And it's just, numbers will start to blur after a while. So to have it where we can use a ruler and we can check them off as we're proofing data, we just have to print those reports to lay them out and proof them out. We're trying to go more electronic in our filing system so that we're storing everything electronically so that we can share it without having to print it. But yeah, I can't speak for other departments.
Right.
I won't ask for any more big copies.
Well, if I can just give a quick example, because it's not finance, but I mean, legal used to basically duplicate the packets in yellow. You know, if I'm in the ballpark is what we did. And so we kind of asked the question why. So we don't do that anymore. And we don't get the packets all the time. We have these. And so, I think we're making an attempt. Sometimes in a paperless society, we create more papers. It just happens. But I know that everyone is aware of that, and I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think the online agenda packets has probably been the biggest improvement of the paper, because you would see that the copy room would be going all day on Mondays creating those packets. So I think that's been probably our biggest area. So we're always looking on how we can become more electronic. The city also, I don't know if you recall, you approved a sole source agreement for NeoGov that will have electronic forms. I think that's the most paper I see pile up in my inbox are all the personnel action forms that we still route by paper, as well as like quick check forms, travel forms, things that we can hopefully integrate into that new forms program within NeoGov. So that program will help us cut down on paper considerably.
And then the checks, we're giving people like paper checks, or they get, most everybody's getting direct deposit?
So almost all of our employees get direct deposits. We make it pretty discouraging to get a check. So most employees are on direct deposit. The vendors still get, most of our vendors are still paid by check. That's been a long-term strategic goal of ours, is to get a P-card program in place as well as ACH vendor payments in place. So we're currently working with our bank to demo some of those products. We've had some setbacks just because we've had some staffing changes the last couple of years. That's kind of stalled that, COVID, and then some staffing changes. So that is part of our strategic plan and something we're still pursuing.
Okay, thank you.
So I am going to move on from finance unless there's any questions that you have specifically about my department. I'll move into the budget. Okay, so I like to put this up at the beginning of this wrap up, and then I'll throw it up again because in August, on August 14th, you will have a public hearing regarding the budget as well as the current year amendments, the amendments to the current year budget. And with that, there are going to be 3 ordinances before council to consider for approval as well as a resolution. So we will have an ordinance to amend the current budget. And I will forewarn you now, we kind of polished that amendment list off today and sent it out to departments to review. It's going to be a big number. It's probably the biggest number I've ever seen. But I would like council to know that a lot of this is not asking to spend money you weren't aware of. It's just adjusting for timing issues. So there are things in there, for example, in the 23 budget, the water fund did not plan to spend their remaining bond funds. But that project appears like it's going to be done by year end. They're going to end up utilizing all those bond funds. So we need to amend the budget to capture that revenue as well as those project expenses that will be completed by year end. Wastewater was kind of the opposite. They thought they were going to have it all done in 22. So they had all their bond funds programmed to be spent by the end of 22. They ended up spending and receiving reimbursement of those funds in 23. A portion of them pushed into 23, so that will be on the amendment list. There was the additional $7 million in ARPA funds that water received from the Idaho State Department of DEQ to finish some of those projects at the water plant. That'll be on there. Then you're gonna see some timing issues. Vehicles that were ordered in 22, but because of delays, we couldn't receive them, so we had to push them into 23. There's going to be some amendments on there related to golf, the equipment that council approved for purchase earlier this year, and then the additional improvements that Tim was talking about earlier. Then we also will have to have an amendment on there for closing that golf fund out. We'll have to just make some accounting entries, and we'll need the budget there to make those entries. We're not spending any more money, we're just closing that fund out and having the general fund absorb it, but for them to absorb it, they have to have the budget there to do that. So I'm still working on that. There'll be $2.5 million on there for the airport. That's not money the city spent, but the airport, when they're spending the money, they're approving a city asset. And one of the rules of accounting is we have to inherit those improvements, and we have to make an entry to our books to do so. So it's not our money, but we inherited an improvement to an asset that we jointly own with the county. So we'll capture 50% of that asset through a financial transaction to our book. So you'll see some big numbers on there, but it doesn't mean that we spent money we weren't planning on spending. It's timing issues, it's new money that the city received. There was, earlier this week, Dustin presented at Monday evening's meeting the project on 21st Street. That wasn't a planned project, but we have the funds and reserves. We have some new money from the state of Idaho that will be paying for that project. So it's just amending the budget to allow us to get that project done in the 23 year. But the revenues were there in their savings, as well as the new revenue that we had received from the state that will pay for that project. So those are the type of things that you'll see on the amendment list. And those will go out in your packet a week before the meeting. You're welcome to reach out and ask me any questions you have on those. So just be prepared. The bottom number is a big number, but it's all items we were aware of or we had the funding for. And then you'll have your appropriations ordinance, which is the 24 budget. So that will be a listing of all the city funds and departments and their total budget by those departments, and it will add up to a grand total for our 24 budget. That will be before council to consider for approval. And then part of supporting that budget are property taxes. So you'll have another ordinance that is to certify a property tax amount. And then we'll have a foregone resolution. Foregone taxes is the amount of taxes that we do not take. Legally, we can raise our tax base by 3%. If we choose not to do that, we can reserve the amount in a foregone balance that would be available to us at a later time to take. There are some restrictions to how you can take those funds and how much of those funds you can take, but what it does is it reserves those funds to be taken at a later time. So if we are allowed a 3% property tax increase, but we choose to take a 0%, we can take that 3% and reserve it to take at a later time. Council, through that resolution, you can decide to take the full 3% or less or 0. Regardless, you have to have a resolution. On the flip side, if we had included in our budget a plan to use foregone taxes, it would require a resolution as well. So those are, we always will have to have a foregone resolution regardless what we have planned to do with foregone taxes.
That can also go back, right? What it's already is in it now, we can just say, we don't want to keep foregone taxes. Or no?
No, I don't believe you can. You can use it to spend, but you're limited how much you can use. So at the most, you can only take 4% of your property tax base from your foregone taxes.
Yeah, I understand that, but there's no way to not have that account anymore or that pocket of money that we can't just.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Oops. So general fund, we have 4 main revenues that support the fund. We have our liquor apportionment from the state of Idaho. We have admin service fees, so those are fees the general fund collects from enterprise funds for performing services. So we have, general fund provides all the legal services, accounting, payroll, human resources, executive. So those, we track all that time through a time study every year and use the historical averages of those time studies to figure out a percentage of those budgets that would be reimbursable by the enterprise funds. Then we have our state revenue sharing that we get from the state of Idaho, and then property taxes. So we'll spend, so tonight we'll talk about property taxes. I'll get that down. But before we get to property taxes, I want to go over some new income that we have in the general fund this year. The biggest one being investment income. So I worked really hard last summer with our bank to set up some investment tools on our operating account that would allow us to keep pretty much every dollar that we didn't need to clear a check into some kind of investment, so that we were earning interest on every dollar we had in the bank for the most part. I have about 50% of our funds sitting in at the state treasurer's pool. And then the remaining funds that are in those operating accounts have that investment tool on it. So we're earning money on every dollar that's not needed in that account to clear a check. And with that, in addition to the rate market, we have been doing really well on earning investment income on our reserves that we have in the bank. So when we wrote the 23 budget, we were just getting those in place, and we didn't really, know how high the rate market was gonna go or how much of those funds we could get into that investment account to work for us. So our 23 budget was very modest. We had for the general fund, 120,000 budgeted for investment income. We're projecting to collect over $500,000 in the general fund on our investment income.
Excuse me, that's from interest rates on the dollar that we have in that account, correct?
It's the interest rates that we have on our operating funds and our investment funds.
Okay, thank you.
So that's reserves. So we always have our reserves trying to earn income on us, for us, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So with the 24 budget, we captured the investment income, but we wanted to be pretty conservative on what we put in 24 budget for investment income, because as quickly as you can have it, you can lose it. The interest rate market were to take a tumble, all that income wouldn't be available to us anymore. I would like to believe that I think that we'll probably see interest rates come down, but I don't think we're gonna see them come down significantly. I think they're gonna work on bringing those down gradually. So you can kind of see, based off the schedule, that we've utilized investment incomes quite a bit in our 24 budget, but we were trying to be conservative in comparison to where we're earning it currently. One of the other things I did in the 24 budget is we had a lot of one-time like funding requests or funding needs. And I tried to balance that out where we were not just going to reserves to pay for those, but we were covering some of it by income. So if and when that income comes down in the 25 or later budgets, we can offset it by those one-time items coming out of the budget. Then we also have a new revenue source, which I believe Chief Reitmeyer discussed with you on Monday afternoon, which is the GMT revenue. And that's a new revenue we're getting through the state of Idaho on our ground emergency transports with our ambulance billing service.
Amy, if I could just be rude and interrupt you for 1 second, because I really want to drive this home for the council so that you understand when you go talk to people, they want to know what the city's up to. And if you just look at these numbers right here, $2 million, and we're looking at 177, that's what we got, 22 and 21 and all that stuff. But that didn't just happen. That's being proactive in how we manage our resources. So we might make some bad decisions along the way and spend more money than we intended to on something, but we also have a lot of good things that we're doing. And the public just needs to be aware of that. These things don't happen automatically. It takes vigilance, by the staff to do that, and that's what Amy did. She said she spent a lot of time working with, our institutions and others, and her staff, I know, have worked very hard with her too, but, I think that's something we can be very proud of. And we have other examples in the city where we're doing some good things, and people just need to know that.
I know when I had to move a couple banks just for some awesome interest rates, and I got minimal accounts, it was a pain in the butt, so. Appreciate your guys' hard work.
We spent a lot of time on bank accounts this past year.
Yeah.
The mayor walked in one day when we were playing the guessing game on how much our monthly interest was that month, because it's been kind of fun, because it's been going up every month, and so it's been kind of fun to see that type of earnings that hasn't been available with such a low interest rate market. Wastewater, I'll point out, Dustin presented Tuesday evening about how wastewater, they were saving that rate increase. They were putting a lot of it away because they knew that they had a large portion of their projects out at the wastewater plant that were gonna be cash funded. He went through those projects with you Tuesday night. So we were able to utilize all that money that we've been saving away for those projects because they're building them up. So we were able to get some additional earnings on those to help fund those projects, so.
Now, sidebar, in the situations of like this, where if we weren't building up, right, we weren't putting that away, and then we had like this reservoir failure like this, we wouldn't have had these funds to even get this off the ground, right? We would not have been prepared for this.
Well, the water fund especially has been really focused on building up their reserves, because when we went into these plant reconstructions, water funds reserves were pretty low. So, and they had the biggest bond they had to cover, so not only did we need to make certain we had a rate increase high enough to cover the bond payment, but we also needed it to get the reserves up before we started making those bond payments, because part of the bond requirements is we have to keep some debt service reserves in the bank. But yeah, they've been really cautious with their funds these last few years while that plant construction was going on to stabilize their reserves, and it was good planning on their part because we can see how badly those reserves could be needed. So yeah, we were really fortunate that we had the reserves that we did. So what does this mean for property taxes? So we are going to be coming to you in August with a proposed budget that has a 0% property tax increase. So we're utilizing those, investment revenues, the GMT revenues, and some other increases in revenues. We had some of those state revenues have gone up. So we're taking those new revenues and we're able to balance the budget without a property tax increase. We did capture, so you see the two figures there on that far right column that have the red asterisk next to them. That represents the new taxes that are coming from new construction and annexations. So it's not additional taxes on our current tax base, but new assessed values to the market. Then we've, down below, you can it shows where we've got those funds allocated. I kind of wanted to touch on transportation fund some. I want to provide a little clarity because Tuesday night when Dustin gave his presentation, he referred to the general fund. And when he was referring to the general fund, he was talking about transportation's general fund. So we have a separate fund for transportation. I call it the operating fund, but that's what he's talking about when he says their general fund is the fund that covers their operating and maintenance expenses as opposed to where their capital projects are housed in the capital projects fund. So transportation fund, last year, the general fund allocated to the transportation fund $250,000. So we lowered general fund property taxes by $250,000, increased transportation funds property taxes, and that was mainly due to the street impact fees that the transportation fund lost. So that helped them protect their reserve balance. And then this year it came back to the general fund. The transportation fund, with the creation of the stormwater fund, no longer has to pay for those stormwater related expenses. Those have now come out of the transportation fund and they've gone into the stormwater fund. In addition, the transportation capital fund was getting approximately $240,000 each year to fund stormwater capital projects. So they were getting $240,000 of property taxes to pay for capital projects related to stormwater. So what we did is we took that $240,000 and we reallocated it to their operating fund. So it was almost like a wash. We took back our $250,000, but we gave them the $240,000. And this is from, I should clarify for the public, we're talking about how we allocated taxes. We didn't actually, each year we get to determine how we want to allocate our property taxes, what funds we want those dollars to go towards. So this year, we're taking what was in a prior year going towards stormwater capital, and now we're dedicating it to transportation operations.
So with the new stormwater fee possibly coming into play, and then some of that is now gonna be taken away from being pulled out of property taxes, right? Because now they're just paying straightly into that enterprise fund. Am I using the right terminology? How long would it take for them to see that slight drop in the property taxes now that we're no longer having to pull from that pocket?
So the current stormwater operating expenses were being paid for by the transportation fund. And then the capital projects were being paid for out of the capital transportation fund. Both those funds are supported by property taxes.
Right.
We aren't proposing that we reduce our property taxes. Council can make the decision to do that, but that won't be in the proposed budget. What we did is we took the property tax dollars that was originally allocated towards stormwater capital. And this fiscal year 24, we're gonna allocate it to the transportation operating funds. And so in all my time here at the city, the transportation fund has always had a budget written where the expenses were more than the revenue. So every single year, they've been chipping away at their reserves. Their reserves are getting lower and lower every year. So by removing the stormwater expenses from that transportation fund, putting them into the enterprise fund where the rate will go to support those expenses, so we've reduced transportation's expenses, and we've reallocated the property taxes that were supporting stormwater. Just from those two changes, this year is the first year transportation fund has had a budget where their revenues exceeded expenses. So in this year's budget, the 24 budget, we'll have an entry that's stabilizing their fund balance, meaning it's bringing their reserves back up.
Right.
Because their reserves were at about 10% at the end of fiscal year 22. So their reserves need some help.
And
So
then-
that's kind of where those dollars will be going towards now, is stabilizing the transportation fund.
Right.
Which the great news is by the end of, I think in fiscal year 25, we'll have those reserves back up to a healthy limit of 25%. And we can also replenish their road and bridge reserve that we keep for the South Bay Bridge. And so then I think we would be looking at fiscal year 26, we could take a look at either taking some of their highway user fees and diverting them to capital projects, or we can take a look at property taxes.
Okay, so I was trying to understand that, because eventually the stormwater, will build up as obviously revenues start getting put into that pocket of money, so then
Yeah.
it'll kind of stop to upset. So I just was curious when that would start being an option in property taxes to kind of, put those in the right spot, so. Thank you. Sorry if you explained that the first time and I wasn't getting it, and then you explained it again, and that makes more sense.
No, it's complicated, so.
Thank you.
So as far as property taxes, those are the biggest changes that in regards to how we're allocating out the funds. But it's a 0% property tax increase. It does have new construction and annexation in there. And just moving on, we will see what we are including in the budget with a 0% property tax increase. It includes a 2.5% COLA for all the pay groups. I think Vicki was here before you in May and discussed that. That includes all of our current pay scales, the pay scales that we currently have in place. In fiscal year 24, there will be 0% on our health premium. There will be no increases to health premium. It has updated PERSI rates. July 1st, PERSI rates change. Public safety rates go up, general member rates go down. But then on July 1st of 2024, which is also part of the 24 budget year, PERSI rates are going up for all groups. And they have some pretty significant rate increases planned for 24, 25, and 26. So those rate increases are planned based off their most current actuarial study and based off the current market condition of PERSI. Hopefully, they won't end up having to actually take those rate increases because they would be significant to the city. It has the additional funding, so we have facility funding. So we have the $250,000 of deferred maintenance budget we gave to facilities in 23 is also in there for 24. And then what we have also done is we've taken that assigned building fund that we had the $6.5 million that was going to pay for the fire station. And we have another round of funding. So the property taxes includes 1.6 million that would go into that fund again in 24 to take that balance up to about 8 million. We've programmed the entire 8 million in the budget should council decide to use it. So the language that's in the budget is straight from city code for what that fund was intended for, which is the improvement or construction of city facilities or properties. And you saw tonight through Tim's presentation, he had a lot of capital requests in there. They're not, so those are all facility related. So when we sat down with Valerie, she gave us a list of like $12 million in facility improvements we could make today if we chose to. So what the mayor and I discussed is let's just program what we have available in that fund. And then over the next few months, when council starts looking at deferred maintenance and facility issues, they can make decisions after those discussions. So I know that's a priority of council, is to go over our deferred maintenance and our facilities and the projects that have been identified, and to make some decisions and prioritizations of those facilities. So that will give you the budget to cover some of those projects, should you choose to do so.
Thank you.
Doesn't mean you have to spend it, but it's there and available should you have projects you want to put those funds towards.
So, question. So if the public sees that in there, then you said that it would show up the 8 million. So 6.5 plus 1.6, right? That's where you're coming up with the 8 million?
Yes. So it's not new money. It's money that we've been building up in our savings account over 7
So
years.
it's not $8 million added to the taxes.
Correct.
That's what keeps getting messed up in people's minds.
And it has a specific use.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we
It's
can't
tied
just use
to
it
a
everywhere.
specific use, yes.
Yes, correct. We included the airport funding requests that they made. We included the mayor and council pay increases that were recommended by the compensation committee. We included most of the department requests. And then the budget is also utilizing reserves to pay for some of these items, not all of these items.
Sorry, can we go back to that mayor and council pay increase, because we voted against getting a pay increase, correct?
I don't believe you guys took action.
No vote.
It was just going over it, we still need to come back to that, sorry.
So what this does is that it's there
In case
based off
we
what
do or
action you
don't.
take.
Okay, thank you.
And then what I don't have in the presentation, but it was in your packets, is the list of requests that were made by departments and whether they were funded or not. So I know a couple of the council members, I brought printed copies because they were wanting some printed out ones that were easier for them to read rather than the screen. It was a big document and we struggled on how best to give you that information. So if you want it in a different format, just please stop by my office and we will get it for you. Because it was, yeah, we didn't know. We wanted to keep enough content in there, the fields that we thought were really important for you to see, like the description of the request, the benefits, the consequences of those requests. So if you need a better printout, come and see me and we'll get that for you. So I just want to recap what we are funding from reserves, and as I mentioned earlier, there are more items in the budget I could fund from reserves because they're one-time in nature, but I really wanted to balance out that investment income in case we were to see a significant drop in that. Because what I don't want is we have a 0% property tax, so we bypass that 3% increase, and then we have this big fall in our investment income that we would then have to try to make both of those up with our property taxes the following year. So, as I mentioned, I balanced it out by utilizing revenues for some of our one-time needs. This will show you what we have reserves dedicated towards. So, some of these are consistent to last year, so I won't go over those. The legal fees, you guys have some ongoing litigation. So we've put that money into council contingency, just like we did last year. So if those cases progress and we have ongoing legal bills, what we'll do is we'll move them from contingency over to Kayla's budget as needed. So rather than just putting it in Kayla's budget where she would have it available for her contracted services account, we'll just move it over as those bills come in. The airport, this airport's coming out of reserves. That was the only place we could really pay for that.
Sorry, airport, we are, that's out of our property taxes, correct, that we're paying?
It's coming out of our reserves, so our savings, which, is accumulation of prior year property taxes, you could say. It's, this is based off the presentation they did. I know at that presentation, they had talked about maybe having some additional funding that would, where they wouldn't need as big of an ask on capital, but we haven't heard back from them on that, so we're putting it in there. And, these are all items council can, decide to change, but we're building it into the budget.
Okay.
And then we have some carry forward funds in there. What that means is it was in the 23 budget to be spent, but the project isn't gonna get completed in 23, so we're just carrying it forward into the 24 budget, and that's that comprehensive plan that Shannon and her department has been working on. And then we have some restricted reserves. So I put in the budget to spend some reserves. And these are reserves that are not part of the unassigned reserves, so they have to be used for specific purposes. We keep a record of those reserves separate from general fund reserves, that's the opioids. I know Captain Clone at the police department is working on a program. I don't know the specifics of that program. I don't know if he's planning on spending $150,000, but that's what we currently have in the bank account that we've collected off the opioid settlement, so I just programmed it into the budget. And once he has a plan, those funds will be available to put towards that plan. 583 funds is funds that are restricted specifically for the police department. It was from a private donation, and the donor had pretty specific requirements on how they used those funds. And so we have that, we're just carrying it forward. That would be the amount that is still left in that account that we're just putting in the budget so they can spend the remaining funds next year. Those funds are being used in this year, some of those funds to pay for our new K-9 officer. Along with some donations, they've gotten some donations as well. So we did have some personnel requests, but we did not put any new personnel requests in the budget. So Chief Reitmeyer, he was here earlier this week and he spoke about his division chief. Facilities requested a new technician, and the police department requested 3 additional positions so they could bring lieutenants into the pay scale. So just to circle back on what you will be taking action on in August is the 23 amendment list, or the amendments to the 23 budget, the 24 appropriations ordinance, the property tax certification, and then the foregone resolution. And that's all I have for you tonight, unless you have questions for me.
Thank you, Director. I don't. Councilors? Councilor Lickey, do you have a closing question?
I really don't. I appreciate Amy's thoroughness. I do just want to clarify that no staffing requests were included in the budget currently.
Currently, there are no staffing requests included in the budget.
Okay. One thing that I would like to see, just because, I know that departments are feeling a little overwhelmed, but it'd be nice to see where our vacancies are per division. So if that's something we can see in the future, that might help us make some decisions as we move forward. But thank you, Amy. That was really a great breakdown. And I just, again, want to thank the mayor and your team for recognizing that we had an opportunity to bring in revenue with some simple banking decisions. And again, figuring out a way to fund things that are of an asset to our community without going after any more tax dollars. I think that's great. And now it's up to us to figure out if we can make it even better. So appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I did include in the packet a calendar of our public hearing dates and then the subsequent readings of the ordinances and resolution. The budget guides will go out in the paper like we've done in the previous years, and we'll also get some additional budget information out for council. And we'll let you know when we have that available.
Could we maybe put this slide on Facebook? Or will, because these shouldn't change, right? The dates
The
won't.
dates will not change. These dates will be included in the budget guides that go out in the paper.
Yeah.
And so when they get that budget insert, it'll have, information about attending the public hearing and how they can do that. Then I'll work with the PIO officer and see if we can get get this on the website as well.
Okay, because I know some people don't always read the paper, so it's not always the best one.
Yeah, and then the budget insert that will go out in the paper will also be on our website as well. So I'm sure Carol will put a quick link to that, and then we'll get the dates up there as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
That was great.
Yes, very informative.
Next item up is closing comments on this under Roman number 4, budget items. I don't know what I can provide for closing comments except to tell you that I know that staff have been asked to tighten their belts over the last couple of years, and they've done that, and I think very successfully without harming. So we've learned how to do that, and I think we're gonna find some more areas where we can do that, quite honestly. There's always ways to improve. There's always a lot of changes going on in the IT world. We talked about maybe consolidating some of our facilities. If we do that, there'll be savings there, potentially in positions and in, capital and operating and stuff like that. So these are things that we're exploring, and you'll hear more about those as we work on a facilities master plan that Director Barker mentioned, so, but there are a lot of good things going on out there, and it's really exciting, so. Roman number 5, unfinished new business, city councilor comments. Councilor Lidke, I'll give you a first shot if you have any closing comments.
I just really want to say thank you to the staff that have given us some good information that we can ask questions as we go along. And just a shout out to Public Works. They are putting in a lot of time trying to spread their time over multiple projects that I don't think anybody saw coming. And I saw a lot of good work as I was out in the community today, and I just want to commend the Public Works staff for putting in the time to hopefully get us where we need to be so that we can drive down our roads and water our lawns. It's a big department, and I'm sure feeling overwhelming right now. And I just want to say to Dustin and his department that we're paying attention and trying to work with the community members as they have questions. And so just keep up the good work, and hopefully you get a good night's rest when you get home.
Thank you, Councilor. Other council comments?
Just kind of echoing, I thank the staff for all their hard work. I know that especially during budget time, I know I get tired and all these numbers give me headaches, and then I gotta go home and sleep a lot. So I just appreciate all the hard work putting this together for us and giving us as much information as we can to give us the best, so that we can make the best possible decision for our citizens. So without you guys, obviously, we wouldn't be able to do our jobs. So appreciate all the staff that's involved with that.
Well, thank you, councilors. Mayor comments. I guess I would like to also thank our council for the time and effort that you put into this. Sometimes you're asked to attend meetings, sometimes back-to-back meetings, like we have coming up in July. But we'll get through it. So it's very important, I think, that we have city councilors who are willing to serve and spend the time that's needed to do it properly. So, you should be commended for that. And So, and I just say thank you for that. It helps me with doing my job also. We can move to the last agenda item, adjourned.
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved that we adjourn, seconded. Is there,
Sorry, did you know, I didn't speak it very loudly. I did second it, so.
those in
Sorry.
favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, councilors, very much.
Oh, God.